I used to think couples game nights were supposed to be boring. You know, cheap wine, overpriced cheese cubes, one guy pretending he understands craft beer because he once visited Portland, somebody's wife aggressively explaining the rules to a card game nobody actually cares about. Normal suburban torture. What I did not expect was my own wife publicly announcing to a room full of people that she never wanted me in bed. That part was apparently a bonus round. The funny thing is, if you'd asked me 6 months earlier whether my marriage was in trouble, I probably would have shrugged and said something painfully optimistic like, we've hit a rough patch. A rough patch. That adorable little phrase married people use when the house is quietly on fire, but everyone keeps watering the lawn instead. My name's Nolan. I'm 37, own a commercial renovation company, spend too much money on tools I swear I need, and until recently I believed my marriage was mostly solid. Sure, it makes weird noises sometimes, and occasionally the check engine light comes on for emotional reasons, but it still gets you home. Celeste and I had been married 11 years. No kids. That part wasn't planned exactly, but after enough doctor visits, awkward silences, and conversations that somehow always ended with one of us pretending to be tired, we stopped bringing it up. Mostly her, especially her. At some point, our marriage slowly transformed into a very polite roommate situation with joint finances. And listen, I'm not stupid. I know relationships change. Nobody stays 25 forever. People get older. People get tired. People stop randomly making out in kitchens like they're in a perfume commercial. That's life. But over the last 2 years, something about Celeste shifted. Not dramatically. Affairs don't always mysterious hotel receipts. Sometimes they begin with tiny things. The way somebody suddenly smiles at their phone. The way they start caring about outfits for grocery store runs. The way they become weirdly protective over conversations that used to happen openly. Or my personal favorite, we're just talking. Ah, yes. The 4 most expensive words in modern marriage. Still, I ignored it. Not because I was weak, not because I was blind, because when you've built a whole life with someone, your brain automatically searches for less painful explanations. Maybe she's stressed. Maybe she's unhappy. Maybe she's depressed. Maybe Mercury is in retrograde or whatever the hell Instagram therapists blame now. Besides, Celeste was still there. She still laughed at my jokes sometimes. Still touched my shoulder in public. Still sent me random TikToks about golden retrievers acting like divorced dads. You don't expect betrayal from somebody still asking if you want oat milk from Starbucks. That's what makes it dangerous. The first real crack happened 3 months before the game night. We were at a barbecue at our neighbor's house, Damien and Rachel. Well, mostly Damien's house now, emotionally speaking. Rachel was technically still there, but she had the exhausted facial expression of a woman who'd spent 8 years pretending her husband wasn't flirting with every female mammal within Wi-Fi range. Damien was one of those guys. Tall, confident, gym 6 days a week, perfect beard, perfect teeth. The kind of guy who says things like, "Brother, you gotta optimize your mindset." I already hated him on principle. He also had this deeply punchable habit of touching everyone while talking. Handshake, shoulder slap, back pat, arm squeeze. Every conversation with Damien felt like he was checking you for hidden pockets. That night, I noticed Celeste laughing harder around him than around me. Not just polite laughing, not ha-ha. I mean the real laugh. The dangerous one. The one where a woman leans forward slightly and forgets other people exist for half a second. I saw it twice, maybe 3 times. At one point, Damien handed her a drink, and she touched his wrist for like 2 seconds longer than necessary. Tiny moment. But if you're a man, you know. We notice things. Not because we're paranoid, because every guy on earth has watched another guy flirt before. It's like recognizing smoke before fire. My buddy Trevor noticed it too. Trevor had known me since college and possessed the emotional subtlety of a drunk construction worker. Meaning, he noticed everything. He leaned toward me near the grill and muttered, "You ever gonna tell your wife Damien looks at her like she's dessert?" I snorted. Damien looks at everybody's wife like dessert. Yeah, but yours looks back. That sat in my chest longer than I wanted it to. Still, I brushed it off. Because admitting something feels wrong is dangerous. Once you admit it, your brain starts connecting dots whether you want it to or not. And suddenly, every memory becomes suspicious. Every late errand, every locked phone, every unexplained mood swing. So instead, I did what married men do best. I became an idiot voluntarily. A few weeks later, Celeste started going on evening walks. Now, to be fair, she'd always liked walking. But suddenly these walks involved makeup. Ladies and gentlemen, respectfully, if your wife starts putting on expensive perfume to go walk around a suburban neighborhood at 8:30 p.m., your marriage may be entering what scientists call some bullshit. One night I joked about it. You expecting paparazzi near the mailboxes? She rolled her eyes while putting on earrings. It's called wanting to feel good about myself. Babe, you're going power walking past middle-aged accountants and one raccoon with anger issues. She gave me that look women give when they've already decided you're annoying before you even started talking. You always do this. Do what? Make little comments. They're jokes. They don't feel like jokes. That right there? That's another warning sign. When somebody suddenly loses their sense of humor, specifically around harmless questions. I held my hands up. All right, sorry. Go win the neighborhood marathon. She left. And I remember standing in the kitchen thinking, that conversation was weirdly hostile for absolutely no reason. But then again, marriage is full of weird little moments. You don't panic every time something feels off. Otherwise, every married person in America would be hiding in a bunker. Then came the phone thing. One night we were watching a movie on the couch. Celeste got a text. She looked at it, smiled, then tilted the screen away from me. Subtle, but not subtle enough. I didn't say anything immediately. About 10 minutes later, I casually asked, "Who's got you grinning like that?" "No one." "No one texted you?" "My friend Ava." "What did she say?" "Just something funny." "What's something?" She paused. Tiny pause. "She sent me a meme." "What meme?" Now she looked irritated. "Why are you interrogating me?" I laughed. I asked what meme, not for nuclear launch codes. "You're being weird lately." That was the first night I checked whether her phone was face down when she slept. It was. Every night after that, too. Still, I didn't confront her. Because part of me genuinely hoped I was imagining things. And part of me was honestly embarrassed. You know what nobody talks about? How humiliating suspicion feels before you even have proof. Especially as a man. Because the second you say, "I think something's off," you risk sounding insecure. A month before the game night, Celeste started making little comments that bothered me more than I admitted. Not outright cruel, just sharp. Like we were sitting with friends one night and somebody asked how we'd stayed together so long. Before I could answer, Celeste smiled into her wine glass and said, "Nolan's very easy to live with." Everybody laughed, including me. But something about it felt off. Easy to live with? That sounded less like a husband and more like a Labrador retriever. Another time she told Rachel, "Passion is overrated. Stability matters more." Again, weird phrasing, like she was convincing herself of something, or rehearsing it. The crazy part? If she'd just cheated quietly, I honestly think the betrayal would have hurt less than what came later, because cheating is ugly. But humiliation? Humiliation sticks to your bones. And Celeste didn't just betray me, she wanted an audience. The game night happened on a Friday. Trevor texted me that afternoon. "You going tonight?" "Unfortunately." "Bring whiskey." "Why?" "Because Damien bought craft gin again and I'd rather drink gasoline." I laughed harder than I should have. Around 7, Celeste came downstairs dressed like we were headed to a rooftop party in Manhattan instead of Karen and Steve's aggressively beige living room. Black fitted sweater, jeans, perfume, the expensive one. I stared at her while grabbing my keys. "You realize we're going next door, right?" She smirked. "Sorry, your wife still looks good." That answer should have been playful. Instead, it sounded defensive, like she'd prepared it in advance. That feeling hit me again. The quiet sensation that somewhere behind the scenes, a conversation was already happening without me. And I was the last idiot to arrive. The neighborhood game night was hosted by Karen and Steve, which meant two things. 1, the snacks would be excellent. 2, Steve would explain the rules to every game like he was briefing Navy SEALs. Basically, the CIA with charcuterie boards. When we walked in, the living room was already full. Trevor was near the kitchen island, pouring himself a drink from a bottle he'd clearly brought himself because he trusted nobody. Rachel was on the couch, scrolling her phone with the expression of a woman mentally packing a suitcase. Damien stood by the fireplace, laughing with 2 other women. Of course he did, because if Damien wasn't being observed by at least one married woman, I assume his skin began to peel. He saw Celeste and his whole face changed. His smile sharpened. "Nolan," he said, coming over with both arms open like we were old war buddies. "Damien," I said. He gave me one of those overconfident handshakes where the guy tries to subtly test your grip strength. I squeezed back, not aggressively, just enough to remind him I wasn't built out of oatmeal. Then he turned to Celeste. "Celeste, wow, you look amazing." My wife smiled, not polite smiled, glowed. "Thank you," she said. I watched the way his eyes moved over her face, down for half a second, then back up, and I watched her let him. Trevor appeared beside me like a sarcastic guardian angel. "Careful," he muttered. "Your face is doing that thing." "What thing?" "The thing where you're about to bury someone under a patio." "I'm fine." "Sure, and I'm emotionally available." I took the drink he offered me. "What is this?" "Bourbon." "Why is it in a coffee mug?" "Because Karen only has wine glasses, and I'm not sipping bourbon out of stemware like a widowed countess." Across the room, Celeste was already laughing at something Damien said. I felt my jaw tighten. Trevor noticed. "Say the word," he said quietly. "For what?" "I'll spill chili on him." "There's no chili. I'll improvise." The first hour was normal enough. Painfully normal, actually. There were jokes about work, complaints about property taxes. Someone mentioned a new Pilates studio nearby, and Damien immediately began explaining core strength to women who had not asked. Celeste sat 2 seats away from me, not beside me. That was new. Usually at these things she sat next to me automatically. Little married habit. This time she took the chair between Rachel and Damien. I sat across from them, which meant I had a perfect view of everything. The first game was some trivia thing. Steve explained the rules for 11 minutes, even though the rules were printed on the box. Then came a card game called Truth, Dare, or Drink, because apparently adults in their 30s still enjoy recreating freshman orientation with mortgages. The rules were simple. You drew a card, answered the question, did the dare, or drank. Harmless. At first, it was funny. Karen had to admit she once stalked an ex's new girlfriend online for 3 hours. Steve had to confess he had cried during a dog food commercial. Trevor drew a card that said, "What's your most toxic trait?" He didn't even hesitate. "Being right too often." I said, "That's not a trait. That's a medical delusion." People laughed. Then Damien drew a card. "Have you ever been attracted to someone in this room?" The whole room went loud instantly. "Ooh! Drink! Answer it!" Damien leaned back, enjoying the attention like it was oxygen. He looked around the table slowly, too slowly. Then his eyes landed on Celeste for just half a beat too long. She looked down at her glass, smiling. My stomach went cold. Damien finally lifted his drink. "Gentleman never tells," Trevor muttered beside me. "Good thing he's not one." I took a sip of bourbon to keep from saying something worse. Rachel laughed, but it sounded dead. Celeste said, "Coward." Damien grinned at her. "Maybe?" There it was again, the tone, the private little doorway in a public room. I leaned back in my chair and let my thumb rub the edge of my glass. I was watching. A few rounds later, Karen drew a card and read it out loud. Did you marry your physical type? Everyone laughed. A harmless question. Steve immediately said, no. Karen usually liked tall guys with hair. Karen patted his knee. And now look at me. Mature, evolved, charitable. Steve raised his drink. To charity. Everybody laughed. Rachel said Damien was exactly her physical type when they met, before he discovered protein powder and moral flexibility. That got a bigger laugh. Damien put a hand to his chest. Wounded, I said. Some wounds build character. You should try collecting more. Trevor nearly choked on his drink. Celeste gave me a quick look, not amused. Then Karen turned to me. What about you two? I opened my mouth. I was about to say something easy, something safe, something like, Celeste was way out of my league and I compensated with persistence and decent credit. A joke, a normal husband joke. But Celeste spoke first. Physical type? She repeated, drawing the words out. She took a sip of wine, slow. The room quieted a little because everyone could feel a performance starting. She tilted her head, smiling like she was about to say something edgy but charming. Well, she said, Nolan is reliable. A few people chuckled. Trevor looked at me from the corner of his eye. I stayed quiet. Celeste continued. He's handsome, obviously. She waved a hand in my direction like she was generously acknowledging a decent appliance. But if we're being honest, he was never really my type. Karen made an awkward little sound. Oh, come on, that's not what the card means. But Celeste was warmed up now. And when a woman like Celeste gets an audience, common sense leaves the building and sends a postcard from another state. Rachel said softly, Celeste. Celeste laughed. What? It's a truth game. I looked at her, and for the first time that night, she looked back at me with something almost challenging in her eyes. Like she wanted to see what I would do, like she was daring me to be embarrassed. I said calmly, Careful, truth games still require judgment. A couple people laughed. Celeste's smile tightened. Damien watched us from behind his glass. Then Karen, probably trying to save the moment, said, So, not your type at first, but then love grew, right? That was her escape ramp. A nice wide ramp with lights and signs. Celeste could have taken it. She could have laughed and said, Exactly. She could have touched my arm, could have made it cute, could have preserved basic human dignity for everyone in the room. Instead, she looked at Karen, then at Rachel, then at Damien, and said, Honestly, I never wanted him in bed. Silence. Steve froze with a cracker halfway to his mouth. Karen's eyes went wide. Rachel looked down like she'd just witnessed a car accident. Trevor stopped moving completely. Damien did not look surprised. That was the first thing I noticed. Not my wife's words, not the fact that my marriage had just been publicly humiliated in front of a room full of people. No. I noticed Damien. He lowered his eyes to his drink and smiled. Tiny smile. The kind of smile a man wears when he already knows the punchline. That smile told me more than Celeste's sentence did, because a room full of people had just heard something brutal. Most of them reacted like decent humans. Shock, discomfort, embarrassment. Damien reacted like someone hearing a familiar song. My chest went still, not hot, not shaking, not devastated. Still. That calm place men reach when anger gets serious enough to become useful. Celeste glanced at me, waiting. Maybe she expected me to get red-faced. Maybe she expected me to storm out. Maybe she expected me to laugh weakly and save her from herself. Bad news for Celeste. I had done a lot of renovations in my life. And one thing I learned early, when a wall cracks, you don't scream at it. You inspect the foundation. So I set my glass down, looked directly at her, and smiled. Not happy, just polite. Well, I said, 11 years and I finally get the honest review. Trevor made a choking sound. Karen whispered, Oh my God. Celeste's face changed, just a flash, shock. I leaned back. Since we're all being honest. The room stayed frozen. Damien looked up at me now. His smile was gone. I turned my gaze to him for half a second, then back to Celeste. You know, babe, most people drink when they don't want to answer the card. My voice stayed calm. Interesting choice. Celeste's cheeks flushed. It was a joke. Nobody laughed. I nodded. Sure. Then I looked around the table. Great game, by the way. Really brings couples closer. Trevor stood suddenly. I need air. I stood too. Same. Celeste snapped. Nolan. I looked at her. What? You're not seriously going to make this a thing? I laughed once. Celeste, you just announced to a living room full of people that you never wanted your husband in bed. I'm not making it a thing. You gift-wrapped the thing, put a bow on it, and passed it around with the crackers. Steve stared into the carpet like he wanted it to open and swallow him. Karen looked like she might cry from secondhand humiliation. Damien said nothing, which was smart, for once. Then I grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair. Trevor followed me toward the front door. Behind me, Celeste said, Don't walk out like this. I turned at the doorway. I'm not walking out because I'm hurt. That was only half true. I'm walking out because I'm sober enough to know I shouldn't say what I'm thinking in front of witnesses. And then I left. Trevor caught up with me halfway down the driveway. Cold air hit my face hard enough to clear some of the bourbon fog out of my head. Behind us, muffled voices exploded inside the house. Good. Let them deal with the emotional biohazard they invited into the living room. Trevor shoved his hands into his jacket pockets. Well, he said, that went to hell faster than I expected. I let out a short laugh despite myself. Too soon. It's never too soon for stupidity. We reached the sidewalk. I stared out toward the dark street while my brain replayed the moment over and over. Not the sentence. Not even Celeste saying it. Damien's face. That little smile. That calm. People don't react calmly to shocking information unless it isn't shocking to them. Trevor glanced sideways at me. You all right? No. Fair. But I'm also not stupid. Trevor nodded slowly. Yeah. I looked at him. You know something? Careful with that question. Trevor. He sighed through his nose. I know Damien's a snake. That's not new information. I know he flirts with married women. Still not new. Trevor hesitated, and suddenly I hated him a little for hesitating, because hesitation means calculation. Calculation means there's something worth measuring. I never saw anything concrete, he said carefully. That was not a denial. But, he rubbed the back of his neck. I've noticed they got comfortable. How comfortable? Too comfortable. I stared at him. That hit harder than I expected. Not because my wife might have been crossing lines. Because apparently everyone else had front row seats while I was still buying popcorn for a different movie. Trevor looked genuinely uncomfortable now. I didn't want to be that guy. The guy who tells his friend his wife's acting suspicious? Yeah. You should have tried. He nodded once. You're right. For a minute we stood there in silence. Then the front door opened behind us. Celeste. Of course. She marched outside already furious, which was impressive considering she was the one who had just detonated our marriage over wine and board games. Nolan. I turned slowly. What? Her eyes flicked toward Trevor. Can we talk alone? Trevor immediately pointed both thumbs at himself. Oh no. I love gossip, but not enough to die in a suburban driveway. I'm out. He walked off toward his truck. Coward. Smart coward. Celeste crossed her arms. You embarrassed me in there. I laughed. I genuinely couldn't help it anymore. There's a point where things become so absurd, your brain stops producing normal reactions. You announced to a room full of people that you never wanted your husband physically, Celeste. I was joking. No, you were drinking and feeling honest. Different thing. Her jaw tightened. She scoffed. You're twisting this into something dramatic. Something dramatic, I repeated. You publicly humiliated me in front of our neighbors. Oh my God, grow up. Interesting. Not apology, not regret, annoyance. That told me more than anything else. I stepped closer, not aggressively, just enough that she actually had to look directly at me. Do you understand, I said quietly, how insane that sentence was? She rolled her eyes. People say things during games. Not that. You're acting insecure. I nodded slowly. Okay. Okay, what? Now I know what kind of conversation this is. She stared at me. Then her tone changed slightly. Softer. Calculated softer. Nolan? Too late for soft voice mode. No, I said. Don't suddenly switch to customer service voice now. Her eyes flashed. You know what your problem is? This should be educational. You take everything personally. I blinked at her. You literally made me the subject. She threw her hands up. You know what I meant. No, actually, I'd love clarification. She exhaled dramatically. I meant there wasn't crazy chemistry at first. At first? She paused. I noticed something else too. She still wasn't denying the statement itself, only the reaction to it. People who feel guilty defend the damage. People who feel justified defend the wording. I folded my arms. So, let's simplify this. Nolan? No, simple question. I looked directly into her eyes. Did you mean it? Silence. Not long. Then, you're making this bigger than it is. I smiled once. That wasn't my question. Her face hardened. I'm not doing this outside. No. Usually when people avoid yes or no answers, there's a reason. She stepped closer now too. Angry. You want honesty? She snapped. Fine. Maybe we didn't have some explosive physical connection. Big deal. Most marriages don't. That sentence hit differently, because now we were getting somewhere real. Not jokes, not deflections. Actual truth leaking through the cracks. I tilted my head. Interesting. What? You said we. What's that supposed to mean? It means you're trying to make this mutual. Her eyes narrowed. Oh, please. No, I said calmly. You don't get to rewrite my experience for me. You didn't want me. Don't drag me into your confession to soften it. That landed. I saw it. A flash across her face. Not guilt. More like irritation that I wasn't collapsing emotionally the way she expected. Behind us, the front door opened again slightly. Karen peeked out. Poor woman looked like she wanted to dissolve into mist. You guys okay? Celeste immediately answered. Yes. I answered at the exact same time. No. Karen froze. Okay then, she whispered, and vanished back inside like a frightened raccoon. I rubbed my face, suddenly exhausted. You know the worst part? I said. Celeste crossed her arms tighter. What? You said it like you wanted people to hear it. That's not true. Then why look at Damien before you said it? That one landed hard. Her expression changed instantly. The first real panic of the night. Not because I accused her, because I noticed. You're paranoid. Maybe. I shrugged. But Damien looked real comfortable hearing it. He didn't do anything. I didn't say he did. I suddenly realized something terrifying. Celeste had become bad at lying because she'd stopped needing to hide her contempt. That's what happens when someone loses respect for you. They get careless. Not because they're smarter, because they genuinely think you won't do anything. She looked away first. Then she muttered, I'm going home. I nodded. Good idea. Aren't you coming? In a minute. She stared at me for another second like she was trying to regain control of the conversation. Then she failed, turned, walked toward the house. I watched her go, and for the first time in 11 years, I looked at my wife and genuinely wondered whether I had ever actually known her at all. Trevor honked once from the curb. I looked over. He rolled his window down slightly. You gonna keep staring at the house or grab a drink with me? I glanced back at the house, at the warm lights, at the people inside pretending they weren't listening through windows. Then I looked at Trevor. Drink. Correct answer. And honestly, that bourbon at the shitty 24-hour bar off Route 9 probably saved me from making several extremely expensive decisions that night. I ended up sleeping at Trevor's place. That came the next morning. At 7:13 a.m., the doorbell camera alert went off. Or technically, my phone notification. I almost ignored it. Then I saw the thumbnail. Damien. Walking up my driveway. I sat upright so fast Trevor nearly dropped his coffee. What? I stared at my screen. Trevor walked over. His face changed immediately. Oh. The clip showed Damien walking to my front porch carrying coffee. 2 cups. He rang the bell once, then again. A few seconds later, the front door opened. Celeste stepped outside wearing one of my old college hoodies. Damien smiled and handed her the second coffee like this was the most normal thing in the world. Trevor looked at me carefully. You wanna maybe not commit a felony before breakfast? I kept watching. Celeste laughed at something Damien said. Then she touched his arm. That specific casual touch between two people whose boundaries died a while ago. I felt something shift inside me then. Not heartbreak. This felt more like insult turning into clarity. Trevor sat slowly on the armchair across from me. Okay, he said carefully. That's bad. I kept watching the clip. Damien leaned against the porch railing like he belonged there, like my house was an extension of his morning routine. Then came the detail that really got me. Celeste looked around before stepping closer to him, checking. People only check surroundings when they know they're crossing lines. Trevor muttered, "Well, that's not neighborly." I replayed the footage, twice, 3 times. Then I zoomed in. Trevor blinked. Jesus Christ, you turned into Batman overnight. Shut up. No, seriously, this is where every bad marriage story starts getting expensive. I stood up. Trevor immediately straightened. Okay, what are we doing? Going home. You sure that's wise? Nope. That was honest. The drive back felt strangely calm, like my brain had finally stopped fighting reality. I wasn't trying to convince myself anymore. That part was over. When we pulled into my driveway, Damien's truck was gone. Of course, cowards rarely stay for the sequel. I walked inside quietly. Celeste was in the kitchen, still wearing my hoodie, still drinking coffee. Damien's coffee. She looked up immediately, and for a split second, I saw panic. I tossed my keys on the counter. Morning. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You finally came back. I pulled out my phone, turned the screen toward her. Her face lost color instantly. I spoke calmly. Would you like to explain why Damien's delivering coffee to my house at 7 in the morning like you're already sharing custody of furniture? Celeste stared at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. Her brain was moving fast now, calculating, building exits. I can explain, Trevor whispered behind me. They always can. Celeste shot him a murderous look. She looked back at me. It's not what you think. I leaned against the counter. Really? Because what I think is that my wife publicly humiliated me last night and then had another man bringing her coffee before sunrise. You're twisting this. Her jaw tightened. Damien came to check on me. Trevor barked out a laugh so loud he scared himself. Oh, that's brutal. Celeste snapped. Can you stop talking? Trevor raised both hands. Honestly, no, I'm fascinated. She stepped closer carefully. Nolan, nothing happened. I nodded slowly. Of course. I'm serious. Trevor quietly grabbed his jacket. I'm going to give you 2 a minute before this turns into another masterclass in avoiding responsibility. Neither of us answered him. The front door closed behind him. Now it was just us. 11 years together standing in a kitchen that suddenly felt rented. Celeste crossed her arms. So what? You think I'm sleeping with Damien? I shrugged lightly. I think you crossed lines long before today, she scoffed. You're acting paranoid, and you're acting insulted that I noticed. Nolan, I held up a hand. No, don't switch tones now. Don't suddenly become gentle because the conversation stopped going your way. Her eyes flashed. I'm trying to fix this. No, I said quietly. You're trying to manage this. That shut her up. I walked past her toward the living room slowly. You know what really got me? I said. She followed behind me. What? Not the sentence. I looked back at her. It was how easy it was for you to say. Silence. You didn't hesitate. You didn't look guilty. You didn't even look nervous. Nolan, so what now? I looked at her for a long moment before answering. I don't believe you. Her face tightened instantly. What? I don't believe this was harmless. I don't believe Damien showing up here this morning was innocent. And honestly, I exhaled slowly. I don't think you respect me anymore. That's not true. For months you've been acting like I'm the annoying obstacle standing between you and a more exciting life. Nolan, please. No. For the first time all morning, my voice turned hard. Not loud, hard. I'm not doing another year of this. I'm not competing with your neighbor for basic respect in my own marriage. Her breathing shifted, panic finally starting to replace confidence. Too late for that too. I walked toward the door. She followed quickly. So that's it? I stopped with my hand on the knob, then looked back at her one last time. I think we stopped being on the same path a long time ago, I said quietly. I was just the last one to notice. And then I walked out. 3 months later, the divorce papers were signed. Trevor helped me move into a smaller place across town. According to him, every divorced man eventually ends up with 3 things: a leather chair, overpriced whiskey, and opinions about smoking meat. Unfortunately, he was right. Celeste tried reaching out a few times during the first month. At first, it was practical things: bills, documents, the house. Then came the emotional messages. I miss talking to you. You gave up too fast. I wish you'd fought harder for us. That last one almost made me throw my phone into a lake. Funny how people call it fighting for the marriage, when what they really mean is, please continue tolerating my disrespect. I never answered most of them. There wasn't much left to say. As for Damien, that ended exactly how every sane person expected. A man who enjoys sneaking into someone else's marriage usually isn't built for loyalty once the situation becomes real. About 6 weeks after Celeste and I separated, Rachel also filed for divorce. But according to rumors, Celeste and Damien's life didn't work out well either. The neighborhood gossip machine had a field day with the whole thing. Karen stopped inviting people to game nights for a while after the incident. Steve still couldn't look at me without visibly remembering the sentence. Honestly, fair enough. The strange part? Once the humiliation faded, I realized something important. That night at the game table didn't destroy my marriage. It exposed it. The marriage had been dying quietly for years. That sentence was just the moment the lights finally came on. A few months later, Trevor dragged me to another neighborhood gathering. Smaller crowd, different house, no games, thank God. At one point, somebody awkwardly asked, "So, how have you been holding up?" I took a sip of bourbon and shrugged. Honestly, better than expected. And for the first time in a long time, that was actually true. If you felt this story hit hard, drop a like, subscribe for more, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support keeps Steelheart beating.